Michigan State versus Western Michigan, the game that's taken on Friday night. It's something that Michigan State has done the last plenty of years. I believe it's been at least 7, 8 years whenever they have their first game of the year at home. They start out Friday night, and they're starting out against Western Michigan, a program that is in their third year of Lance Taylor. This is going to be a really, really big year for him this year. It went to a bowl game last year. The real question is, can they do it again? And in order to see if they can, we need to talk about what Western Michigan has, how Michigan State lines up to what they have, especially when it comes to Western Michigan on offense, because this is a Western Michigan team that last year specifically, and I think this year as well, is going to be a team that is going to be really dependent, and their strength is really going to be relying on that offensive line and running the ball. You have a running back in Jalen Buckley that is coming back now. The top running back last year, Jay Nixon, did transfer out, but Jalen Buckley is going to be their number one running back, at least according in this game. He's going to be, because Cole Cabana is out for this game. It was actually announced earlier today. I thought he was going to be someone that Michigan State would have to keep an eye on. I thought he was going to be someone that was going to be impactful for Western Michigan. I think he is going to be in the future, but it's going to be really led by Jalen Buckley, who was pretty good in a few attempts that he had last year. I believe he had 9 touchdowns. He's going to be someone that Michigan State's really going to have to keep an eye on, especially because this offensive line, they are experienced. Now, they don't have a ton of returning starters from last year's team, but they are experienced overall because they were able to bring in transfers, and we know how good Western was last year running the ball. And the real question of this team, especially last year, is going to be who's going to be the quarterback, because Hayden Wolf is no longer at Western Michigan. And that answer was also explained today by Lance Taylor, is that there's not going to be one single starting quarterback for Western Michigan. It's going to be Brady Jones, which is the junior transfer, and it's going to be sophomore quarterback Brock Lowry. This is a competition battle that a lot of people had going into and throughout camp. That was a really close competition. I think having both of these guys play really kind of explains why and how close this QB matchup was for Western Michigan. Then they're really going to have to look at who they're going to throw to, because Western Michigan did lose quite a bit of production at the wide receiver room. Now, they do have Blake Bosma back, one of the best tight ends in the MAC. He was really impactful last year. I think he's going to be a kind of a go-to guy for these quarterbacks, especially when they're trying to figure out who's going to really be the wide receivers. And then you have Michigan State's side of the things as well on defense. This is a defense that does have some experience. It's also a defense that has some new people in it as well, especially starting on that defensive line, which is Michigan State's biggest question mark, at least on defense, in my opinion, because I think secondary, especially the safety position, I think you feel pretty good about it, especially if Nakai Martinez does play. Now, he is questionable. It's going to be a game-time decision, but even if he doesn't play, they have guys back there that have been able to contribute. And then really the corners are really the only other kind of question marks, but you really have Joshua Eaton. That seems like he's taking over that CB1. You also have Chance Rucker that has some experience. So it's really going to be up to kind of the front seven of Michigan State to see how they're able to stop the run. Because like I said at the beginning, this Western team, their strength is going to be running the ball. And you have a couple of guys in the middle of that defense, like Grady Kelly, that is new to this team. Michigan State lost quite a bit in the interior defensively. Now they do have like Alex Van Sumeren back. They have a couple of guys back that did play, but they're going to have a couple of new guys there. And I think Grady Kelly is going to be one of those guys that if he is really impactful, he's going to be able to stuff the run, which in this game I think is going to be extremely important. And really the other part that's going to be really important for Michigan State in this game is obviously going to be the pass rush. We all know that Michigan State last year wasn't great at getting to the quarterback, and even when they did get to the quarterback, they weren't great at taking the quarterback down. Now, you do have a couple of guys back in Thompson that needs to have a bigger year this year. Now, I do think he absolutely can, but they also did go out in the transfer portal and get a couple of young guys that have a ton of potential, but really hasn't shown it or really haven't been able to play too much. Now, I know a couple of those guys are guys that are pretty highly at least recruited. One was a 4-star from Wisconsin. The other one was a defensive end from Air Force, which he was really good in Air Force, but Air Force is a completely different level than the Big Ten. Now, obviously, Western isn't in the Big Ten. They're obviously in the MAC, so I think this level of play, I think you're really going to want to see Michigan State be able to get pressure on Western Michigan, especially in an offensive line that is experienced, but it's not experienced together, which I think is going to really help Michigan State in this situation. But I also think that you're trying to figure out kind of what's going to happen with this defense and who's going to play quite a few minutes, because I think linebacker, you have Jordan Hall, I think is going to be extremely impactful. You have a couple other guys there that can really play. I think this is going to be a pretty decent test for Michigan State. Now, I'm not saying Western Michigan is going to be the best offense that they play. Absolutely not in any factor or situation or form. But Michigan State's going to have to see how they play, and they're going to have to respond after this week to continue that momentum if they get pressure on the quarterback, because we saw last year Michigan State was really good in the non-conference getting pressure against the quarterback. We'll see if that continues in this game and continues well beyond this game as well. But I think Michigan State's defense should overwhelm Western Michigan. I don't really think this is a close game when you're looking at that matchup. And then obviously you have to look on the other side of the ball as well, Michigan State's offense versus Western's defense. This is a Western defense that really struggled last year. They gave up over 30 points at least 7 different times. One of the main concerns that they had last year is their consistency, especially when it comes to pass rush. So when you look at both teams, if you want to say what's a little bit of familiarity or similarity between both of these teams, it's definitely the pass rush. Now, Western Michigan did get there a little bit, but they weren't able to, again, convert. So pass rush is going to be a main option. And they also lost one of their best tackles on this team. Now, they did go and get some guys, so I think that room is going to be pretty thin overall for this defense. So that's really going to be another key matchup to really watch, is Michigan State's offensive line versus Western Michigan's defensive line. Because one thing about this MSU team going into the season that a lot of people have talked about is their hope, is their improvement on the offensive line, especially when it comes to depth. I know Coach M has talked about the depth, how much it has gotten better. I think that's where a lot of Michigan State fans are really excited or hopeful for this team to see how good this offensive line can be. If this offensive line can take a step up, I think this is going to be a pretty solid offensive line. Now, there are a few transfers coming in, like Connor Moore, that was really good at his level. The real question is, what is he going to be at Michigan State? Against Western Michigan, I don't think he should really have any issues. I think Michigan State should be able to protect Aiden Childs pretty well, and if they don't, I think that's one thing to be really kind of concerned about. Obviously, it's the first game of the year. This first game jitters, but I would really want Michigan State to play pretty simple on offense. I wouldn't really push it too much. I wouldn't really run very many difficult packages or complicated packages. Just keep it simple. I want Michigan State to be able to get a push on the offensive line. If they can do that, especially in third down and short, which is something that they really struggled with last year, I think that's really going to make Michigan State fans really happy. And I think that's one of the first things I'm going to keep an eye on, is when that first third and short comes in, can Michigan State convert on that? And I think they should be able to do with this Western Michigan defensive line. Now, Western also does have some strengths on this team and some situations that I think Michigan State might want to keep an eye on, and I think it's actually their secondary, especially the safeties. You have a safety in Tate Halick that is back. Aaron Warford is back as well. Those are two guys that are going to really be important pieces, especially in the back end for Western Michigan. Now, they did go and get some quarters through the transfer portal, so that's kind of new for them, but they also do have a couple of guys back at the linebacker position, Dominic Moon and Dylan Moore. They were backups, but they should be able to fill up the stat sheet there. So this Western Michigan defense has some new pieces, weren't necessarily great last year. I don't think they would necessarily be great this year. I think Michigan State should be able to put up quite a few points. I think it should be expected that Michigan State should be able to score over 30 points, exactly what they did last year for a lot of teams that went up against Western Michigan. So I think with the wide receivers Michigan State has, with a Nick Marsh, with a Krishan McCray, with an Amari Kelly, with a couple other guys, I think there's going to be quite a few players that are going to really play in this game. I think with this offensive line, it's going to be probably running back by committee for MSU, but with the offensive line, with the defense that Michigan State is going up against, I think this should be a game that they should be able to score quite a few points and should be able to win pretty comfortably. And really the last thing you really have to talk about in this game, especially from the Michigan State side of things, is kicker. Who's going to be the starting kicker for this team? MSU has been dealing with some injuries there. It seems like it's kind of up in the air. Now, this is a type of game that really shouldn't necessarily matter who the kicker is, because Michigan State should be able to put the ball into the end zone quite more than kicking a field goal. But hopefully it doesn't come down to a situation where a kicker matters. I don't necessarily think it does. The line for this game is 20.5, with Michigan State being the favorite. Do I think Michigan State covers the 20.5? MSU historically really hasn't been able to do that. I do think under year 2 for Jonathan Smith, I do think they start getting back to the Michigan State of old a little bit. Now, does that guarantee 8-9 wins? No, but I think Jonathan Smith, with this offensive line, with the weapons that they have, with hopefully an improved defense, hopefully an improved pass rush, especially in this game, I do think Michigan State should be able to score quite a few more points. Do I think they cover over? Probably not, just because of historically what MSU does. But I think MSU will be convincing in this game, and I think MSU fans will be pretty excited. So I'm going to have MSU winning this game. It's going to come down to the run game, especially for Western Michigan. I think MSU is just going to be too good on that interior, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think MSU offensively is going to be an issue for Western Michigan. And I think when it all comes to the end on Friday, I think Michigan State fans will win comfortably and be decently happy with how they play. Now, if they don't win comfortably, that's a whole other conversation that we can talk about. But I think MSU ends up winning that game and end up going 1-0 going into week number 2 against Boston College. So that's the preview for MSU